Hi everybody, how you doing? This is Tracing Roots, Telling Tales Tuesday, episode 27, Genealogy with Donna. Just to begin the program today, today is the 175th anniversary of California becoming a state in the United States. 175 years. We did it in 1850. And yes, that does coincide with the gold rush. I believe that federal government needed the gold in California, and we were already applied for admission, and they gave it to us. Anyway, it used to be a day where you got off school. Mike remembers, the teachers got off school. School was closed for the day, and today it's just another day. Anyway, today's episode 27 is going to be about mapping your roots using old maps to locate family land. And here's how it goes. Start with what you know. My people came to the United States in different times of the year. Remember, I have, as all, 4 segments. I have my mother's side, my father's side, and their sides. So that would be my mother's father, my mother's mother, my father's mother, and my father's father. So those 4. At that point, we have the Archambos coming from France to Quebec. We have, and that was in 1640s, somewhere around there. We have the Goodwins, my mother's mothers, coming in 1640. The 3 Goodwin brothers came. The Cates came in, you know what? I don't have a date for that, but I know it was early. I'll have to check that and let you know next week. How about that? Good for me. And I'm going to write this down. When did the Cates come to the United States? Cates, USA. Well, they weren't the United States then. In 1600s, they were barely making do. Now, I can trace, and I can't tell you which line. I believe it's off of the Goodwin line somewhere. That Diggory priest from the Mayflower, and his signature is on the Mayflower Compact, came over in 1625, I believe, to Plymouth. Unfortunately, he died. He was very ill at the point where they were anchored off the shore, and when he came ashore because of the cold, etc., there were 100 of the pilgrims that died, and unfortunately he was one of them, though his family, his wife and his daughters, had stayed in the Netherlands and then came over later. Anyway, mapping your progress of your ancestors. If you could plot where they stayed, if you could find them on the earliest census, which was 1790, and trace where they lived. Now, let me tell you a story. I have been very privileged. Mike and I went back to the East Coast after we retired. We did all kinds of things back there, and one of the things that we did is we traced my family roots. In this case, it was the Goodwins. Well, we traced a lot of roots, but in this particular story is about the Goodwins. I go into a museum, historical, and find out that the Goodwin family had been caregivers of this particular plot of land that included a farm, and that was where the counting house was. The counting house in the olden days was where import-exports came. It was where the treasury of the town was. The treasury, maybe even for the state, if it was a seat of the state. Anyway, so they were the caregivers, and they are listed in the historical brochures, and they are also listed in the tourist pamphlets. That's how I knew to go there. I was really surprised when I approached the lady. I had, as always, Mike and I will go somewhere and we will get a bunch of the pamphlets, read them, and then see what the next place to go would be a place of interest for us. Anyway, I saw their name in there and just thought that was really odd and wondered if that was something I would be related to. This was in Kittery, Maine. Turns out I am. So that was really cool. In addition, they advised that I should go to the Historical Society and see what they could dig up for me. Now, it must have been a slow day for these ladies. There were 3 of them. And we walked in. I had my clipboard with all my Goodwin information on it. I do have the lineage back to 1640 when the 3 Goodwin brothers came to the United States. Daniel Goodwin in particular. And they were able to reproduce a map for us that had the Goodwin land on it. These were another set of Goodwins at a different time that actually owned the land. And she described where we could go and where we could see that land today. It was very exciting. It was over a bridge, so it was near water. They were farmers. It was very cool to see. Anyway, so you begin with the basics, and you get that information from your census records, deeds, obituaries, family Bibles. If you're lucky enough to have a family Bible. I remember my grandmother had a Bible, but I think my uncle got that. And my mother had a Bible, and I frankly don't know where that wound up. I wished I'd had it. It had information in it. And I don't know which of my 2 sisters got it. And I don't know. There were a couple of books that my mom had that I didn't get. And I'm when I think about it, it kind of saddens me. Anyway, you pinpoint the towns just from the census records. You pinpoint where they were. And you might find that the borders shift on the states. The borders might have shifted on the towns once they were incorporated. So it's interesting to see how they migrated. You know, one minute they're living in Maine and the next minute they're living in Vermont, or they're living in, Massachusetts, and then they're living in Canada. You never know. Old maps tell new stories. Explore the historical maps. Perhaps you'll find new neighbors, landowners, churches, railroads, and schools. I found in the Kate family in Dover, New Hampshire, I was able to find my grandfather's, I had addresses from the census. So I was able to find where my grandfather had grown up, and that house existed at the time that I went there. Unfortunately, that house was sold after my trip there, and the house was bulldozed down, and 2 condominiums are now in its place. So I am way fortunate to have a picture of that house. I believe I only have I'm the only one that has the picture of the house, and I did put it in the family tree so it would be there for future generations to see. He was able, my great-grandfather, Charles, was able to walk from home to church, but the church was under construction at the time that we went, so I wasn't able to get inside of it, which is too bad. He was a deacon in that church, which at that time was a high, prestigious position. He then could walk from home all the way to his business, which is a furniture company, and that was down by the river, and they got their power from the river to manufacture, for the power for the building. And that furniture company was there into the 60s, maybe into the 70s. Now it is actually a power plant. So that's kind of interesting how that evolved. Land records, plots, and property lines, what your ancestors' footprint was. Maybe maybe you'll find that they homesteaded in the Midwest and they got their, I can't remember, could you get 600 acres of land? Anyway, and did they add to it? What did the plot look like in 1820? What did the plot look like in 1860? That would be interesting. And then mapping the land can also reveal the family wealth, the inheritance patterns, or migrations. If you get the wills will then tell you who inherited what. Did the wife get to stay on the land until she passed away, and then it went to the eldest son? Was it split in equal shares by the entire family? If you're a family of 12, that's going to be much smaller lands. Or maybe they, got together and found out that they were better, stronger in numbers, and the land meant more, and they could work the land together. Follow the moves. Now, I have my grandfather going from Dover, New Hampshire. He then went to Boston to attend MIT, and then from there, he came to California. I believe, in fact, we were trying to figure out how he would have come to California. He did it in 1922, I believe 1922 or 23. Anyway, and I believe they came by train. I know that there were times in the 50s and the 60s that they traveled to back home to visit with relatives, and they traveled on the train. We took them to Union Station. They would get on at night, and they would take how many ever days it took back then to get, they'd be on the sleeper car, and they would have the nice accommodations, and that's how they would get back and forth. So my guess is they came on the train with whatever possessions they had at the time, and maybe had the rest of them shipped, though he was a college student, so I'm not sure what would have been. I know they lived in LA. I don't have an address for that, but he did wind up buying a home in San Gabriel. In San Gabriel, and then built his own home in the 50s. He was able, actually in the late 40s after the war, he was able to build his own home up in Arcadia. And so I have that as the migration of him individually, and then my grandmother along with him. So then the whole family went. When you think about the migration of my uncle, let's start there. He was born in Boston, came with his parents across to California, lived in Los Angeles with his parents, lived with his parents in San Gabriel, got married, lived in the guest house that still exists on that property, and then he moved to Pico Rivera, and then from there he moved to Whittier, lived in 3 different homes in Whittier, but the third home he had custom built himself, following in his father's footsteps of once he achieved success, he would build his own home, custom made. So those things I know, but that is only in the 1900s. So I don't have information on family members prior to that. My great-grandmother, I have that too, but again, I would have to go back, and that will be a good exercise for me. Let me write that down, because I know that her husband had died when her oldest was 13. He was a haberdasher, and so where did she go? What did she do? So I'll have to, and I know she came to the United States. I know she came to California because she lived next door to, and that's where my mother was born, actually next door to her parents' house in her great-grandmother's home, or in her grandmother's home. Anyway, the blending of genealogy and geography tells a strong story. You can get information through tools Google Earth, the David Rumsey Map Collection, or the Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps. When you overlay the old maps onto the modern ones, it will show you where the home stood. So I have not done that yet, but that is certainly something that I will be holding on to as one more step that I can do in tracing roots. Unfortunately, I am not able to do I wasn't close to my father's family in Connecticut, but they didn't come from Connecticut. His mother came from Quebec, or her family came from Quebec. They settled in Vermont. At some point, they were in Rhode Island, as were the Waltons, and then migrated down to Hartford. Now, my grandfather was a food salesman, whether it was chocolate or just food in general. His job had him traveling around, and I think that's why they wound up settling in the Hartford, Connecticut area, because he was a manager of a food distribution through sales there. Anyway, those are the things I know. Those are the things I've learned, and I've made notes now to learn more, and I hope to bring them to you in future episodes. Anyway, you guys take care. Have a pleasant, wonderful week. Taco Tuesday. Take care. Talk soon. Bye-bye.